Welcome. I'm Nathan Bell, the Finance Director for the City of Springfield. And in addition to being responsible for the finance function, I'm also responsible for the administration of the city's municipal court. This first slide shows the org chart for our department. We have 19.7 FTE. That's an increase of 1 FTE over the prior year. This is actually a position that has always existed, but rather in the Development and Public Works Department, and we tried something new when it got vacated. We moved it into finance as an embedded analyst position. It is still funded by the utility funds and works exclusively on development and public works activities, but it sits over and works closely with the finance department, and it's actually working very well so far. So while it's an increase to the finance personnel budget and it looks like an FTE add, it has a net zero impact on the city as a whole. This org chart is split out into our functional divisions. The first division is the budget office. This is a 2 FTE division, the budget officer and the embedded analyst that I mentioned. They are responsible for the city's budget and additionally the budget for 3 other organizations, Springfield Economic Development Agency, the Regional Fiber Consortium, and the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission. They're also responsible for supplemental budgets, franchise and licensing, long-range forecasting, and process improvement initiatives. The next division is the Accounting and Financial Reporting Division. This division has 6.7 FTE. They're responsible for the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, assessments, and financial reporting, both monthly and the city's comprehensive annual financial report. They also do the accounting for the three other agencies that I mentioned earlier. They also assist budget with the annual budget, supplemental budgets, as well as the process improvement initiatives. I'm going to skip over court for a moment and go to procurement. This is a single FTE division and is responsible for oversight of the city's decentralized procurement activities, essentially making sure that we're compliant with all federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and ordinances. For the municipal court, we have 8 FTE in this division. This is a misdemeanor and traffic court, and we average about 12,000 to 13,000 cases a year. You'll also notice that the judges are on this org chart. They're part of the finance budget, but they actually are hired by and report directly to the city council. We have a presiding judge and then 2 to 3 pro tems that work part-time, essentially to give the presiding judge off-bench time, as well as covering any time off. Our mission, I'm actually not going to read through this, but you're welcome to pause this presentation if you'd like to do so. I'm going to move on to our budget summary. I've included 2 summaries here. One is all funds and then just a general fund summary. The all funds, because it spans so many funds and so many activities, it can sometimes be confusing and or misleading. For instance, in here you see what looks to be a significant increase in personnel services. But that's for that embedded analyst position that I mentioned before, and it's still funded by the same funds. It just previously was in a Development and Public Works org, and now it's in the finance org, so it shows up in our budget. You also see a significant increase in the materials and services budget, and for fiscal year 21, we actually held that flat for all departments. The reason you're seeing an increase here is that the finance department budget includes the entire budget for the Regional Fiber Consortium. So that budget increased by $75,000, or the materials and services for that budget increased by $75,000 over the previous year. While this has no impact on the city's finances, it shows up in our budget as an increase. And then the capital outlay in fiscal year 20, that was for the video arraignment equipment. And I will talk about that a little later in the presentation. In FY21, the $10,000 budgeted is for the replacement of the digital copier for the Administrative Services Department. Looking at the general fund summary, in personal services, you see a modest increase. I think it's about 3%, and that's right in line with the inflationary pressures that we are experiencing. You are seeing an increase of around $60,000 in materials and services. I mentioned before that we had held those flat, but for the finance department, probably the largest portion of our materials and services is our indigent representation contract. That contract in fiscal year 20 was $423,000. For fiscal year 21, it increased by 8%, or roughly $34,000. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that increase happened later again in this presentation. Additionally, we put $45,000 in the indigent representation contract as a placeholder for the impact of implementing body-worn cameras. We know that it's going to increase the workload for our defense attorneys. We've reached out to peer agencies that have body-worn cameras, and we feel that $45,000 is a reasonable figure to put in there for this first year. This is all contingent, of course, on the implementation of body-worn cameras and when it happens in the fiscal year. If it was to be delayed for any reason, then $45,000 would be removed from this budget. The total of that increase to that contract is $79,000. Not all of it is hitting the general fund. A portion is hitting the police and jail levy fund, but only a small portion. The reason for that is the police and jail levy fund already had a set revenue structure when we passed the latest levy, and so they weren't able to absorb their proportionate share. So the general fund absorbed the majority of it. I think $69,000 of the $79,000 increase to that contract. And then again, the capital outlays for the video arraignment equipment. It was a one-time project that happened in fiscal year 20, and we don't have anything like that happening in fiscal year 21. Moving on to accomplishments, initiatives, and future considerations. I'm not going to touch on all of these. If you want more detail on any of them, you can find them in our finance department summary pages in the proposed budget. I do want to talk about the budget process improvements. This is something, an initiative actually that's going to span many years that we started last year, and in the fall of 2019, we went in front of council with some suggested improvements that we've adopted a number of those. One of those was to discontinue priority-based budgeting. The reason behind that is that we had found that our budgeting and accounting structure had become so complex that it was becoming challenging for not only our department, but for other departments to manage their information. And we were finding a lot of the information that we were tracking wasn't being used for any types of decision making. So we've really been focusing on streamlining, simplifying our budget and accounting structure so that we can free up staff resources to focus on activities that we think would be more beneficial. And that ties into our future considerations. Two of those are long-range financial modeling, which really allows us to make better and more strategic decisions when we have better models predicting potential revenue and expenditure changes. And then performance measures and benchmarks. This is something that allows us to see how we're doing in terms of services and their cost with our peers. So this is something that we hope to turn to and focus on here in the future as we're able to simplify our processes. With that, I'm going to move on to the court division. One of the big accomplishments here was replacing our video arraignment equipment. The equipment was outdated and it was starting to fail. And by getting that replaced, we reduced that potential for having it fail at a critical time, like now with the COVID-19 event. And in fact, that event allowed us to move faster on this in the current year than we would have planned on. We used a vendor who was able to secure equipment that was becoming in great demand, and was able to set some aside for us, and we got that installed and it's up and operating. One of the nice things about it is that it allows for us to do virtual in-depth hearings, and this is these types of hearings we would have had to bring inmates out of the jail up into the court, and now they can remain down in the jail and use this equipment to hold these in-depth hearings. So it really improves the safety of the courts and makes things a lot easier for us. Additionally, our court software, Tyler Technologies, had two new pilot programs and has used the City of Springfield as a beta tester, and both of these were implemented in fiscal year 20. One is a text notification program. This allows us to send out mass notifications and reminders, which has reduced the number of guilty by default as well as increased our collections. For the virtual court program, it is exactly what it sounds like. And again, with the COVID-19 event, this has allowed us to continue our court services where a lot of other courts have had to shut down or reduce the types of hearings that they were having. So it was a very timely test program. And so far, we're liking what we're seeing. We are really a flagship court in our use of this. I think we're one of 5 courts that implemented this, and we have a lot of courts now reaching out to us, asking us how it's working and looking at it for their courts. For FY21 initiatives, court security is going to be a focus of ours. Our council has made this a priority, and in the coming year, we will be bringing to them some solutions with related expenditures. And then lastly, I just want to talk about the mental health impact on the courts. I mentioned the increase in our defense attorney's contract. We've seen the same thing on the prosecution side. And really, we're seeing this impact on the entire justice system for the city, from the jail to police to the courts. And what we're seeing is an increase of individuals getting caught up in the justice system with mental health issues. And what this does is essentially create a lot more work all the way along the line for all those involved. This is something that we will continue to work on with other organizations in our region and looking for solutions to help keep these individuals from getting caught up in the justice system and to agencies that can give them the help that they need. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for viewing this presentation. And if you have any questions for me, please do not hesitate to reach out. I can be reached by email at nbell@springfield-or.gov or by phone at 541-726-2364. Thank you.